If you want to harness menopause as your superpower, then mindset is everything. Mindset about menopause and mindset about your business. We need to kick old, unhelpful stereotypes and thought patterns to the curb because the truth is only we get to decide what this menopause experience is going to be like. And I don't know about you, but between the choice of it being the worst catastrophe ever and rocking it in my 40s and 50s, feeling in control, powerful, feeling friggin' fantastic, I think I'd rather go with option B. So, in today's episode, let's talk everything mindset and menopause. As I said in a previous episode, I firmly believe that menopause needs a serious makeover in Western society. In the West, it seems to be all about fear of horrific symptoms, fear of getting old, since we live in a culture which prizes and celebrates youth. It seems to be about how hard it is and that we're just breaking down and falling apart and just plain getting old. So I call it on this. Menopause certainly doesn't have to mean any of these things. Did you know that in the blue zones, women have little to no menopause symptoms? And menopause is a time when women step into their place as an authority figure in their societies, an authority figure that is revered. So clearly, it doesn't have to be the way we're experiencing it here in Western society. And just as an aside, there's some really interesting research that shows our attitude towards menopause actually affects our symptoms. So if we have a very negative attitude towards menopause, our symptoms tend to be worse than if we have a positive attitude. I know it's kind of difficult to have a positive attitude surrounded by a very negative outlook on femininity and aging. Not too many years ago, menopause was something that no one even talked about. And thankfully, that's changing. There's a long history of women's health not being studied and women's quote unquote problems being something that polite society does not talk about. So again, I'm so glad that the veil is being ripped off and that women are starting to talk openly about their experiences. I think the problem is that the discussion is only one-sided, painting a picture of only horrible suffering. And again, I'm not denying that symptoms for some women can be incredibly intense and disruptive. And for many women, they can create a lot of hardship. So that absolutely needs to be recognized. But I see that this shift seems to be happening in the last few years about menopause being more commercialized. And a lot of companies and people in the menopause field see that there's honestly a lot of money to be made by preying on women's suffering. And so to get women's attention, the messages that are out there are all negative messages designed to grab attention and to get vulnerable women to buy certain products. They play on our fears about aging. They play on our fears about feeling incapacitated and powerless in menopause, and our fears about intense suffering during this transition phase. And again, I'll go back to the comparison with puberty. Our girls go through puberty most of the time knowing what to expect in terms of physical, mental, and emotional changes. Nor do we see a whole culture around it saying that puberty is horrific and it needs to be managed. Obviously, we have our jokes and our memes about puberty as parents of teens. And we know there certainly can be incredibly rough moments. And there are, of course, outliers where it really is an incredibly intense, painful transition. But we don't usually see this whole culture around puberty as being the end of childhood and that this is a catastrophe, whereas menopause almost feels like it's an end of womanhood. And the way we talk about it feels like it's a complete ending with nothing else to take its place. So, yes, I believe menopause needs a serious rebranding where we can honor the fact that symptoms can be pretty rough and disruptive for some of us, but that there are tools for which, for most people, will bring those symptoms under control. And that menopause isn't just about symptoms, but about the start of the second half of our adult life with the knowledge, with the experience, and if we choose, with power and strength. And that, my friends, is all related to mindset. So, talking about this makes me think of some of the women. I've seen women come in their late 40s, early 50s, and they're having symptoms. They're feeling achy and they're feeling tired and irritable. And they end their list with, but I guess it's just aging and I'm getting old and I just have to face the fact. And I always answer back to this. No, this doesn't necessarily have to do with aging at all. Beyond the fact that as we get older, our bodies can't cope with a lot of the bad choices we make. And so inflammation goes up, our moods can be affected, and all sorts of things can bubble to the surface. So on the flip side to these patients, I have those patients who come in consciously deciding that this experience is going to be something completely different. I'm thinking right now of one patient of mine who she just turned 50 and she's decided that she's going to do something epic. She has entered herself in an Everesting race. So that's where you climb a mountain on foot, taking the ski lift back down and then climb it again and again and again until you've reached X number of feet, which is the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest. Epic. So at 50, I would say this patient of mine is in the absolute best shape of her life. She's dedicated herself to training, and watching her not just physically change with the training, but this mental strength that's appearing is absolutely awe-inspiring. She's decided to say, the heck with 50 being a slow decline into getting old. Instead, she's doing something more challenging than she's ever done in her life, and she's really redefining who she is. It's amazing to see. And although most of us won't necessarily be climbing Mount Everest, we can still harness this transition and do whatever our version of epic is. Or maybe we're just deciding that we're in control of this transition and define what it is we want to do and how it is we want to show up for this second half of our life. And to make this shift, it all starts with mindset. Mindset is everything. This is one of the things I learned during the startup phase of my online business, that entrepreneurship, I think, is minimally 80% mindset. It is a crucible at times, meaning we're like metal being melted down and forged over and over again. Talk about demons and negative beliefs and money stories that stem from childhood. We carry this junk with us into our business, and it all comes bubbling up, and it can block us from having the success we desire or the business that creates the impact that we want to see in this world. Honestly, it's so annoying. Sometimes sweeping the stuff under the rug just doesn't seem to work. Somehow it always seems to pop up again when you're on your own in business. But if we take the time to actually work through them, not only can we see amazing success with our business, we also go through a huge personal transformation, which can heal us on so many different levels. When I personally started my business, I had no idea this would be a part of it. I just thought it was like, you follow the steps A, B, C, and D, and you have a functioning business. But really, the mindset is everything. And again, the same holds true in our personal life and for our physical health. If we approach this as just a passive bystander, instead of switching our mindset to what I call superpowered, where we have control and agency about what happens and what this transition looks like, we can see two very different outcomes. So, how do we shift mindset in business and in health? So, here are the 5 tools or strategies that I've used that have made a huge impact on my business as well as in my health and personal life. Number 1 is getting clear on what you want. If you don't know what you actually want to create in your business, in your life, super crystal clear, then it's really hard to make headway on any changes. It's like driving a boat and not having a clear destination. So you might end up on a beautiful tropical island, or you could end up on a barren rock in the middle of the sea. And if you don't have that clarity, then how do you know which direction to go in and which choices to make? So I personally did a lot of work in creating that future vision, what I wanted my business and what I wanted for my health, and not simply involving like a lot of thinking and evaluating of all the options out there. What it would really involve was instead dreaming. And I often started with an exercise that I call my magic wand exercise. So in this exercise, I have a menopause fairy godmother who waves her wand and tells me absolutely anything I dream of is possible. So what this does is it helps get rid of the thoughts like that I want to travel 6 months of the year, and then suddenly the thought pops up, oh, well, that would be impossible. How would you deal with pet care? But how can you still have a teenager who's in school and do this? And all those other sort of like limiting beliefs that start up. So the magic wand helps me stay in the vibe of, well, if absolutely anything could be possible, what would I really want? And that allows me then to tap into really deeply the values and the things that are working and not working in my life and what I would like to see change. Then with that vision of your future self, it's all well and good to do that visioning, but if you then put away in a journal and never look at it again, nothing's going to happen. So there are a couple of ways to keep that vision at the forefront. So you could write it out in a journal every day. I've done that for months on end at times when I wanted to shift something in my life. You could create a vision board. I'm sure you've heard of these where you take pictures that represent the things that you want to bring into your life and physically paste them on a Bristol board from the dollar store or wherever and hang it up somewhere where you'll see it every day. That really works well for those who are visually motivated. And then you can also do this digitally as well. And there's many ways that you can make a desktop collage of what you want to bring into your life and what you want to create. Or you can simply journal out your vision of your future self and revisit that. Let's say every Monday you reread that just so you remind yourself again and again. Also, if you have a meditation practice, you can end it with briefly visualizing you as that future version of yourself. What do you see around you? What do you hear? What do you feel? Really tapping into the emotions is what gets things to shift and to happen. Reality tends to shift when we start making decisions, and they're often unconscious decisions as well as conscious decisions based on that vision that we have of what we want. And those conscious and unconscious decisions take us one step at a time closer and closer to that version of our future self. The second tool that I've used a lot and has worked with others that I've worked with is becoming the conscious observer of your life. Again, the inner thoughts create our outer experience. And through journaling daily, personally for me, as well as many of my clients, they become very conscious of their thoughts as well as the resistance that starts to come up. and the thought patterns that are not serving them. But unless we pay attention to those thoughts, we don't have the ability to shift them. So, for example, when I first started my online business, I had a lot of resistance to social media. I did the thing, but I would always say I hate it, and I would feel a level of tension and anxiety every time I opened up my Instagram or TikTok app. But what I had was a choice. I could have left that and just said, oh, I hate social media, I'm not doing it. But I knew there must have been something deeper underlying this. So I did take a break from social media and I went deeper, and I began to realize that my nervous system was freaking out every time I opened social, because I was always worried about hearing negative comments. And I came to the realization that at that time in my life, what I was doing was being determined by how other people saw me. I wanted everybody to like me and say nice things about me. And then I could believe that I was a wonderful person. And if people said something negative or offhand, I would feel really devastated. But logically, it made no sense why I would feel so wonderful if somebody made a positive comment and so wounded if a person made an offhand comment about my hair or the way I looked, or that I wasn't providing the information that they wanted to hear. So this is a random stranger, and maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they don't feel good about themselves, so they're making themselves feel better by belittling others. Or maybe they have a point based on how they see the world. Or maybe they're just not a really nice person. So without the awareness that there was resistance there and stress there for me, I would have never been able to tap into that deeper level that needed healing. That self-worth had to come from inside me and not from how other people perceived me. And I don't think that's crazy out there example, as I know many of us feel this way, but it's still an area where if we can shift it, we can become a lot happier. We can show up as ourselves without feeling self-conscious, and we can speak our mind because we're not as worried about what the response we're going to get. And I think that's important in business, obviously, as well as life. Because otherwise we're playing small, we're compressing our voice, and our voices need to be out there, especially as heart-centered entrepreneurs. So becoming the conscious observer of our thoughts and what underlies them is the second essential thing in terms of shifting our mindset. So I actually have more about this mindset work in my guide. So if you're interested in what you can do to shift your menopause experience in terms of both symptoms as well as in terms of mindset, check out my guide at menopauseisyoursuperpower.com/guide. Okay, I've done a lot of this third thing I wanted to mention today, which is once we're aware of some of those negative beliefs, what we can do to shift them is really important. So there's many tools out there, from physical tools like tapping to doing a limiting belief releasing meditation. But one of the simplest tools that I've used that's been really effective for me is simply a journaling technique. So when I identify a negative belief, what I do is first I'll journal out the negative belief. So let's say I identified being wealthy as something that only greedy and selfish people want. And I realize that this belief is holding me back in my business because unconsciously I'm worried that if I earn more money, then it's going to make me a greedy and selfish person. So the next step, once you identify what the limiting belief is then you journal out why it's not true. So what evidence is there to say that it's not true? Let's use this example that all people who are rich are greedy and selfish. Well, clearly that's not true. If I look around, I have friends who've done very well financially, and I would never call them greedy or selfish. They live normal lives, they have normal jobs, and they are some of the most socially aware people I've ever met who are very concerned and active in organizations that support the environment and support social change. So clearly having money doesn't necessarily mean somebody's going to be a greedy or bad human being. So then how do we shift those negative beliefs? Well, there are many tools I've used, and I've come to believe different tools work for different people or at different times. So the last step is to write down the new belief and start practicing it every day. So with our example of rich people being greedy or bad, my new belief might be something like good people with lots of money do good things in the world. Or it could be a statement like, I love money and money loves me. So then we take this new belief and we practice it every day. We could write it onto a Post-it note and place it somewhere where we can see it and repeat it every day. One thing I like to do is put this label as an actual alarm in my phone or in my reminders, which then pops up every day at a specific time to remind me of this new belief. You could also write it down and journal about it on a daily basis for a while until you feel that shift happening. It also means catching and be aware of when that negative belief pops up again, because it's not going to go away immediately. Maybe you see somebody driving an expensive car or wearing a super high-end brand clothes, and your immediately thought is, oh my gosh, look at her. She's so self-absorbed. And instead, you shift it in that moment to something positive, like, wow, she looks like she's really enjoying that car, or her clothes look totally awesome on her. How do I know what she did or didn't do to earn the money to treat herself to things that she likes? So do you see how that works? I first identify the negative belief, then identify why it's not true, and then come up with the new positive belief that you consciously practice every day and insert when that negative belief pops up. That's how we can create change. And things exponentially in our business heal. Those past memes that aren't serving us and keeping us unhappy or small. And we can use this also in our health. We can decide to believe that we can be in the best shape of our lives, or that maybe we can feel fantastic energy during this time. And we can shift those beliefs. And then we bring in those small actions that allow us to step into the reality of that new belief. It's honestly magical how much we can shift if we shift those beliefs. All right, my friends, that's it for today. I hope you're off to have an amazing, fabulous day wherever you are. Promise me you'll pay attention to those thoughts that pop up and see if any of them may not be serving you well. All right, Menopause Divas, it's time to chillax. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Stay fabulous.